On the 4th of July 1946, a young woman was led to a huge set of gallows which had been created on a hill in Gdansk. She had 20,000 sets of eyes staring at her, and she was considered a terrible and brutal war criminal, whose crimes were some of the worst of the Second World War. Gerda Steinhoff was just 24 years old when the executioner secured the noose around her neck, and then she was left suspended on the gallows. What surprised many people at the end of the war was the fact there were so many young women who were incredibly devoted to the Nazi Party and to Adolf Hitler, and they would happily and willingly send people to their deaths inside gas chambers and would even kill with their bare hands. Gerda Steinhoff was one of these women, and she paid the ultimate price for her crimes. But why was she hanged in front of 20,000 people, and how did her execution send a clear message of vengeance to the crowd? Gerda Steinhoff was born on the 29th of January 1922, and she lived and grew up inside the city of Danzig or Gdansk. As a young woman, she had a relatively stable and normal schooling, and she did as a teenager do shifts in a farm near to her and served as a milkmaid. Now her early life was dominated though by the Nazi Party, and it's most probable that she was part of the compulsory youth groups for young women, which were set up within Germany. The League of German Maidens was established as soon as the Nazis came into power, and teenagers were eventually forced to attend meetings. In these groups, young women were taught how to have lives in keeping with the Nazi beliefs, and this included raising children for the Reich. They were encouraged to not pursue careers, but instead become housewives, who had many children, and they were also told to serve their husbands, who were to become members of the German army or the armed forces. Inside these groups, many young women were brainwashed. Gerda Steinhoff, after working as a milkmaid, wanted a different career, something further away from the backside of a cow, and she then became a conductor on the tram network in Gdansk. It was a stable job, and she met her future husband and then had a child. However, as the Second World War raged on, many male concentration camp guards, regardless of their infirmities, were called to the front lines to serve, and this left a hole in the guard staff. Because of this, the SS retinue wanted many young women to come in and work inside the camps, and with this, many women were driven to apply for these roles by their Nazi ideologies and beliefs, but also because they wanted a new challenge. They were promised better pay and also promotion throughout the ranks, and Gerda Steinhoff answered the call. She was then sent to the local camp for her, Stutthof, and she underwent a period of training. It was relatively close to where she had lived, and she trained to become an Aufseherin, a female overseer of women prisoners. But she quickly became a terrible and brutal guard who struck fear into the hearts of the inmates. On the 1st of October 1944, Steinhoff was made a block leader, and this promotion meant she was responsible for a block of female prisoners. The site where she worked, Stutthof, opened as soon as World War II broke out, and many Polish people were sent there. The first inmates built the camp, and the barbed wire fences surrounded the site, but then the barracks were expanded over the years, and Stutthof grew to become a huge site. The new camp had 30 barracks and also a gas chamber and crematorium, and because of the expansion, a women's camp was created, with female guards needed to staff it. There were many brutal women who arrived, including Gerda Steinhoff, and the conditions of Stutthof were awful. Diseases spread everywhere, and typhus claimed many lives in 1944, and the inmates who were too weak to work were sent to the gas chambers. Also, executions were carried out on a daily basis, and doctors also killed prisoners using lethal injections to the heart, and guards drowned inmates in the mud around the site. Many of the prisoners were forced to go and conduct hard labour inside different businesses, and many of these were linked to the German war industry, and they made ammunition for their enemies. Within the camp, Gerda Steinhoff was known for carrying out selections of inmates. Every single day there were roll calls, and during this time, guards patrolled and searched for prisoners who showed some sign of weakness or illness. They would then select them to be sent to the small gas chamber within the camp. Steinhoff was known for selecting women who were sent straight to their deaths, and she was a very senior female guard and became an Oberaufseherin. The SS must have been very happy with her brutal and evil work, and she was now responsible for other female guards, and she made sure that these women underneath her were as ruthless as she was. On the 1st of December 1944, she was transferred to go and work at a sub-camp of Stutthof, the Bromberg Camp, and this served the main site. However, she was awarded a medal for her service, but this reward was for the fact she beat and battered female prisoners on a daily basis. She was capable of inflicting terrible injuries and severe batterings. However, as the Second World War turned against the Germans, Gerda Steinhoff knew she would be hunted as a war criminal. Because of this, she tried to escape and hide out to avoid any form of justice or war crimes trial. She left the subcamp, but was eventually found hiding in the local area, and she was arrested on the 25th of May 1945. She was interrogated and was then brought to the first Stutthof trial with a number of female guards, including Jenny Wanda Bachmann. There were also male guards who were tried too. Throughout the court proceedings, witnesses testified about the crimes of Gerda Steinhoff, and they told the courtroom of her violent beatings and how much of a beast she truly was. She laughed in the faces of those witnesses often, and she was very arrogant. But let's remember, she was 24 years old when she was tried, and she was even younger when she turned into a monster within the Nazi camps. For her crimes in sending young women to the gas chambers, Gerda Steinhoff was sentenced to death. She was locked up inside of a prison in Gdansk, and her execution date was set for the 4th of July 1946. Inside the city of Gdansk on Biskupia Gorka Hill, a huge public space, a number of large sets of gallows were created in order to execute the Stutthof guards in public. These gallows were so big that people could see the proceedings from a long distance away. But on the execution day, there were 20,000 people at least who were there to witness the executions of the Stutthof guards, and this included a number of former prisoners of the camp, and they wanted to see with their own eyes that justice was being carried out against some of their oppressors. The women guards who had been condemned were brought out first, and they were hanged before the men. One by one they were led up to the gallows, and they were helped onto the back of a truck, and stood with them were a number of officials and also the executioner, a specially selected prisoner of Stutthof, who was the one to secure the noose. These executioners were seen wearing their striped pyjama uniforms of the camp. Gerda Steinhoff was led up to the truck, and she was then helped onto it by a guard, and she was ordered to sit on a stool. The truck was to act as a scaffold platform, and the crowd of 20,000 were then told of her crimes and what she had been sentenced to death for. With this they shouted at Gerda and jeered, and then the executioner helped her onto the stool, and they then secured the noose around her neck and tightened it. With this a loud bang was heard on top of the truck's roof, and it slowly began to pull off, and Gerda Steinhoff was left hanging on the gallows, suspended by her neck. The crowd of 20,000 saw a horrific spectacle. They saw her and the other women kicking and struggling, fighting for their lives, as the noose snapped taut around their necks. They were putting up a fight as the air was choked out of them, but then minutes later they went still, and it took them a number of minutes to actually die. The crowd that day was made up of adults and even children, and the whole intention was for as many people as possible to see the executions. Gerda Steinhoff was one of the most senior female guards of World War II, who was executed at the end of the war, and she was just 24 years old and was also a mother. She was condemned and executed for the fact she drove many women into the gas chambers, and the crowd that day took no pity on her. In their eyes, she was a beast who rightfully paid the ultimate price. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.